I was 15 years old, went on a church retreat with some friends, thought there'd be girls there. The guy gave the opportunity to give your life to Christ. I didn't even know what that meant, but I was like, oh, I'll try that out, I was an open kid, I guess. So I remember praying the prayer to give my life to Christ, not really knowing what that meant. And then, I prayed for a little bit when I got home, for girls, money. And when I didn't get those things, I stopped praying. And then somebody gave me a Bible. It was a buddy of mine I used to party with, and he had become a Christian, a girl who lived down the alleyway from me. I knew her because she used to jump on her trampoline in the backyard, and I had a trampoline in the backyard, and so we would do that whole thing. So she had preached the gospel to him at a choir trip. He came back a Christian. And so it was, real Bible thumping and all that, and gave me a Bible. And so I was terrified of what my family would think. I used to hide it in my desk because I literally thought it was a book of spells. And then when everybody went to bed, I'd get it out and I'd start reading. Well, okay, so parents divorced at age 1. Dad was Mormon, mother was Jewish. All right, so we actually were raised in the Mormon church till I was 7. And my mom didn't believe it. I never got baptized into it. You do that at age 8, I think, is when you get baptized. And so we stopped going right before then because Dad, he checked out. In my family, Mormonism was equated with Christianity. And so I didn't, for me, I didn't know what the Bible was. I was too young to ever really get indoctrinated into the Mormon church. And so when someone gave me a Bible, that's why I thought this was like some ancient book of spells. And I just knew that it was from a time or a period that would be condemned by my family. And so that's why I hid it in my desk. And so I'd get it out and start reading late at the night. Jewish mother, Mormon father. Parents divorced at year 1. Dad was out of the picture by age 4, married another woman with 6 kids. And so anything having to do with Mormonism, which again, my mom would have equated Mormonism with Christianity. And so that was sort of pushed to the side. And so from age 7 till age 15, I knew nothing about Christ. When I would actually say I knew nothing about Christ to begin with. Like I said, I was only 7 years old when we stopped going to the Mormon church. And so for me, it was all brand new. And it was something that I thought if my mom found out I had this, she would be very upset with me. She wouldn't be upset. I didn't know that, though, as a kid. I kind of made it known that I was a Christian when I was 18. And so, and then then I had to face a little bit of hostility from my family, but nothing too bad. Yeah, I wouldn't say I had a specific call to ministry. I would say at age 15, I started reading my Bible. It was one of the Bibles that just had the Psalms, the Proverbs, and the New Testament. So I'd memorize some of the Psalms because I thought, well, girls will find this attractive. And then I would read through the Gospels. And again, I didn't know there was an Old Testament. I didn't have that. I had to find that out later on when I went to church, when they were like, turn to this. And I was like, why does my Bible not have this? Then I find out there's this whole section. And somebody had given me an abridged copy. I don't know why they thought the New Testament was the only thing that was important, but anyways, I would read the Gospel of Matthew, and everything that Jesus said and did was so polar opposite from what my family did. So you ask the question like, how many times should you forgive your brother? 7 times? And Jesus is like, no, as many times as you're offended, that's how often you have to forgive. And so I would read that and be like, that's not what my family did. If somebody offended us, we would get vengeance 7 times 70, right? Like that was the aim, is we have to put them down. And so I found myself going, I just want to be like him. And so I started being, I wouldn't have called myself a Christian. I was following the ways of Jesus, not knowing that that's actually what it was called, was the way. And so I would memorize some of the Psalms, again, thinking it was for the girls. It ended up being advantageous later in life. But from age 15 on, I knew that being a Christian was what I was going to be. And that was it. And so call to ministry is like, I don't know, that was all there was for me. If I was going to follow Christ, then ministry was it. There was no, I don't know, today people talk about this, like you have a special call to ministry. And I just think, no, I'm a Christian. And whether I do that professionally or outside of that, I'm a Christian. And so, yeah, that was it. 15 on. So I didn't start leading in a church until my 20s, late 20s, well, mid 20s. But I was, from age 15, I was leading Bible studies in the school. I decided that I was going to stop hanging out in the cool cafeteria, and I went to the other cafeteria where I thought I might have influence. And so I started hanging out with those kids and leading a Bible study on Wednesdays, and have been doing that my whole life. Ended up getting discipled in an organization called Young Life. Was in Young Life up until I was about 23, and it was 22, 21 when I had an encounter with the Holy Spirit that would kind of alter the direction. Like, I thought I was going to be a Young Life guy the rest of my life, like be a speaker at camps and, lead Young Life kids. And then my senior year of college, I had an encounter, for lack of a better expression, and I just knew that God's power was for today. And so I was online looking for literature, got my hands on a book called Surprised by the Power of the Holy Spirit by Jack Deere, and read it, loved it. I thought, this guy, he's a seminary professor, so he can speak, it kind of speak my language. The Pentecostals I couldn't get behind. All the extra syllables added to every word, the hype and charisma behind it, I just couldn't get behind it. And so when I got my hands on that book, I thought, this is the kind of Christianity that I want to be. And so I was online looking for more literature. I taken a full-time job with Young Life, and found a church website where it says Jack Deere, pastor in Fort Worth, Texas. Well, I was over in Dallas. So I was like, Fort Worth, dude, I can drive there. I thought he lived in Montana. So I had been praying, God, let me be discipled by someone like Jack Deere, thinking he lived in Montana, and yet he's 45 minutes from me. And so I started commuting out there twice a week, and I would show up with a whole group of Young Life kids. And Jack took an immediate notice to me, and that kind of began a friendship there where he asked me to come join the staff of the church. I started off as a youth intern, and then on the weekends, he would go and do conferences teaching on the gifts, and then he would throw me up on a stage to say, all right, now we're gonna demonstrate this stuff. And so I was demonstrating words of knowledge, praying for the sick, long before I had any business doing that, but that was sort of my training ground, I'd say, when it came to things of the Spirit initially. I was with Jack for about 6 years before I went to go start a church in Dallas. And then that church organization and we planted 3 churches together, one in Dallas, one in Denver, one in Frisco. And then I left that organization back in 2019 and moved back to Colorado. We kept our house when I was there pastoring. And so, we launched Reclamation Church. We called it the Denver Project initially, and then had a name for it after we all got together, but in 2020, right before COVID. So we met for 3 weeks before COVID shut us down, and then had to kind of, kickstart it again later when things started to open up again in Colorado, which we were a little bit later to the game, but yeah, so I've been doing that since 2020, about 3 years now. I first heard of Ken probably in 2012, 2013. He had done a teaching at a buddy of mine's church in East Dallas. It was definitely more out of the box for me. Now, I was familiar with healing and deliverance ministry, but what I saw with Ken was probably more demonstrative and more often when it came to deliverance, when it came to manifestation and power counter and that kind of thing with Kingdom Clash. And then I really got to know him in 2017. We were both part of a conference called the Convergence Conference, which was like it was an Acts 29 conference put on by Sam Storms. He had just written a book called Convergence, and it was sort of about Reformed theology meeting charismatic expression, and how those two things don't have to be against one another, despite John Calvin. And so the guest speakers were Matt Chandler, Jack Deere, Sam Storms, Andrew Wilson, Francis Chan. And then Jack had brought a small team of guys to come and demonstrate the gifts. And so that was me, Ken, and then one other guy. And so that's when Kevin and I first became acquainted. Watching him minister was very different than what I had been exposed to. Because Ken, whenever he would pray for somebody, he would take, 20 minutes to an hour with each individual person. He was very methodical, looking for root issues or a key to get people free. And he was incredibly effective. And so one of the people that we saw, it's a young woman, married, had 3 kids. I knew her because I had been speaking at their church, teaching on the gifts, and she had an issue with irritable bowel syndrome. and had it for as long as she could remember. So bad to the fact that if she didn't have a bathroom right after she would age, she would actually go to the bathroom in her pants. So she had to, being at a conference was hard for her. And so we're sitting down and praying with her, and Ken is asking all of these questions I would have never thought to ask. Questions about various sins, and it boiled down to there being some, I would say, controlling, overlapping relationship with she and her mom, to where, if you were to ask her the question, what are the boundaries you have with your mother? Or where do you begin and where does your mother end? She couldn't answer that question clearly. And so prayed for her to have that broken. And a buddy of mine, literally, when he prayed for her, said, I pull these hooks of manipulation out of your back. She screamed out. She could actually feel hooks being pulled out of her back, and was instantaneously healed. And I know she's healed ever since then, because I've kept up with this family. From that day forward, she's never struggled with irritable bowel syndrome ever again. And so watch that. That was just one example of a number of things I saw Ken do in the prayer time. So at this conference, instead of being out in the, being in the green room, hanging out with all the speakers, we had a green room where we were casting out demons and praying for the sick. And, Ken, that's where he spent the majority of his time. And it was fun because it was Matt Chandler would come in there and start praying for people along with us, and which I always loved about that guy. That was really where I saw Ken in action. And, and I wanted to learn from him. I wanted to learn more. He was seeing things healed that I had never seen healed. And I'd seen deaf ears open up. I'd seen blind eyes open up. I'd seen flat feet change shape right in front of my eyes. When it comes to things like Parkinson's, MS, even things like autism, I'd only heard rumor of those things being healed. I'd never seen anybody actually pray for those things and seen them healed. And so Ken was just seeing more than what I was seeing. And so that's kind of when I wanted to connect even further. It probably helped that we had a friendship to begin with, and that, we had done a conference together and gotten to know each other. Also, my mentor was somebody he knew from the Anaheim Vineyard days. But then, really what I've probably learned the most is when I've gone on trips with him, and or listened to some of the teachings he's done. So I went to Germany with him. I guess that was 2022, March. And it was hard because I was seeing all these people manifest spirits, power of God come over them. And there was that part of me that was, I would say a natural default to me is to err on the side of skepticism. And so I'm wondering, all of these emotions that people are displaying, is this legitimate? And so there's a buddy he's a YWAMer. He goes to my church. I called him up and I'm like, hey, do Germans, do they show this amount of emotion in charismatic churches in Germany? And he's like, Michael, no, nobody in Germany shows these kinds of emotions. I'm like, are you kidding? He's like, no, seriously, nobody does. And I was like, okay. And so I was, you could see that rational part of my brain trying to go, how much of this is hype and how much of it is legitimate? And I just saw a number of people get delivered and set free. And so I tried to allocate a part of my budget on a yearly basis to go with Ken on a trip, just to see things happen firsthand. And then we've also had him come out to my church. So I pastor a church. I guess I said that already, but had him out here just last weekend. It was just a wonderful time for my community as well. Well, obviously, I'm jumping on a trip twice a year, if not more, with Ken. So I clearly have a stamp of approval, big endorsement. But I think John Wimber said it best. He said, ministry is more caught than taught. And you can sit and read the scriptures all day long, but until you actually see the scriptures demonstrated, the gap between your experience of what we read in biblical Christianity and what you know to be true is often very large. And so I think, seeing it hands-on has been the greatest teacher. And again, I'm all for the scriptures. I want my faith to be a biblical faith. But again, my experience of those things has lessened because of time with Ken. I can definitely say that. My experience of the faith versus my biblical understanding of the faith has come closer together in my time with him. So I would encourage anybody to, go to a conference, listen to some of the teachings, go to a conference, and if not, take a trip, or be around people who have been discipled by Ken as well, because a lot of these people are actually seeing demonstrations of power, seeing deliverance happen firsthand, which would make sense, right? They recognize these people as have been with Jesus. Not that Ken is Jesus, but he's obviously been with them. John Wimber said, ministry is more caught than taught, which means you have to actually see things demonstrated, be there, be an eyewitness to things in order to really understand the dynamics of deliverance ministry, healing ministry, prophetic ministry. You look at David, all the guys that hung out with David end up becoming giant killers like David. Yet my experience with Ken in particular has lessened the gap between what I know to be true in the scriptures and what I've experienced to be true in life. And so the more time I've had both with him or with people who've been around Ken and his ministry, the more I think my faith has looked more biblical in nature. And so strong encouragement to any pastor out there. Listen to the content, get on the Orbis site. I think that's really helpful. And when I'm praying for the sick, oftentimes I'll have my phone pulled up on Facebook to get on Orbis and do little Google searches for particular diseases and, commonalities people have found with root issues. And then I would definitely join him on a trip or get to know some of the people that he's mentored and spend time with them. Spend time with them praying for the sick in particular. All of those things I think have been incredibly beneficial for me and those that I know that have stepped into this ministry. This is what I said to my church when he was at my church just a week ago. I think when it comes to living out the faith and the kind of demonstrative works that Jesus did, I don't know anybody on the earth that's doing it better than Ken. I really do think he has modeled Christ rather well when it comes to power displays of the kingdom. And that's what we all aim for, right? We want to model Christ. And so when I think of casting out demons, healing the sick, there's nobody I would want to pray for me or my family more than Ken. Granted, Ken is obviously not Jesus and he can't pray for everybody, but I do think that there's a lot to learn from him and from Orbis. And so, that's the highest praise I can give somebody, I think, is that they model Christ really well.